Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Andy Moriarty and I'm a private practice radiologist up in Grand Rapids, Michigan at Advanced Radiology Services. Tonight we are very excited to introduce the pandemic impact on private practice recruitment, the 2020 perspective and beyond. Welcome to 2021 and a new year. We have some really exciting panelists here to discuss with the group. We have Dr. Krishna Alapati is a member of the board of directors and the section chief of neuroradiology at United Imaging Consultants in Kansas City, Missouri. We have Dr. Meg Fleming, a breast radiologist in quantum radiology in Atlanta, a former ACR Moorfield fellow. Dr. DeQuesada, a partner at the Radiology Associates in North Texas and Fort Worth. And he serves on the chair of recruitment committee at that group and is also active in the Texas Radiologic Society. Dr. Dan Rodgers is a president at the Kanawha Valley, a 6-person private practice down in Charleston, West Virginia, and is the chair of the Economics Committee in ACR's General, SMARL, and Rural Commission, and the vice president of the West Virginia Radiology Society. And I'm your moderator. We are excited to have each of the individuals give a short perspective on what their practice has been like in 2020, now that we've wrapped that up. And then we're going to save Q&A time for the group at the end. But I think that we'll start just going alphabetically. Dr. Alapati, do you want to give us a little bit of your introduction and perspective?
Yeah, hey there, Krishna Alapati here. So I'm part of a group called United Imaging Consultants. We're based out of Kansas City, Missouri. So the group is, I would classify as probably a moderate sized group. We have about 30 to 35 radiologists, about 5 interventional guys, and about 30 diagnostic guys. We cater to about 8 hospital systems in the Kansas City metro area, so kind of all four corners of the Kansas City area. Typically for each hospital on a daily basis, we have about 1 to 2 radiologists that staff each hospital. So every day we have about 18 to 20 diagnostic guys and 4 or 5 interventionalists working. So, we have a pretty busy practice and really hasn't slowed much over the past year, but we have all divisions, neuro, body, MSK, and pretty stout mammography service as well. I am the section chief of neuro in my group, and we have a board of directors that consists of about 8 people, and then we have 1 president. So it's a very democratic group. Everybody who is a partner, and even our partnership is divided into Part A or Class A partners and Class B partners. Really, the main difference is just the pay. Otherwise, and voting rights. But otherwise, even people, first years coming out, fresh out of fellowship or residency, have a pretty good, are able to talk up and give their opinion about different things. So I'm now out of fellowship about 3 years. So I've been practicing for about 3 years. I've been with the same group and pretty happy about it.
So what was your experience in the COVID pandemic as far as recruiting? What did you see that changed early in spring last year? Did that evolve over the summer at all? And then what does it look like now for you?
Yeah, so with the pandemic, the main issue that we faced was the slowing of the volume. So our volume really, I would say, took about, at the worst, maybe a 40 to 50% hit. And on average throughout the year, I think a cut of about 10% over the entire year. As far as in regards to hiring practices, really, our group has, over the past 5 years, somewhat kept more of a lean system. So we were working maybe 1 short as far as the group is concerned. So really, we weren't, we didn't have too much of an impact there. As I said before, our group is fairly democratic. So the way our group works is that, people get paid on a shift basis. So, you can take as much or as little vacation as possible. And honestly, that works out for some people that really like to take vacation so that they can take more. And the people who really want to, work and make more money, they end up working more shifts. So at the time the pandemic hit, I think that really, really worked out for our group, because we actually have a few individuals in our group, myself included, who require or needed some time off for various reasons. And so we were able to adjust that accordingly. Now, there were definitely weeks where we were way overstaffed, but I think by the end of the year, that really evened out as far as, with regards to pay and reimbursement. And fortunately, as a group, we did get a few loans from the government. So that really did help out as far as end of the year returns. And I think that moving forward, and over the year, we actually had about 3 people leave the group, and the 3 that left ended up going to the VA. So, took a little bit of a slower paced gig after that, but, all 3 of them were pretty much kind of on the tail end of what they wanted to do with their practice. Actually, one of them was the president of our group. So, I know it was an uncertain time to leave, but, the way our group is structured, we were able to, get a new president in that seat really quickly. And really the change was very minimal because, everybody really plays an important part in our group. So the structure is not really dependent on from like a top-down perspective. And, as far as volume is concerned, I think that with the decrease in volume, as a radiologist, I feel like, at certain times it was a little nice to be a little light. We're kind of used to the daily grind of, trying to get a whole bunch of studies out there and crank through as much as we can. But, sometimes we have to learn that you got to slow down your pace a little bit. And it definitely gives you a different perspective on how hard you're working at some point and how little, sometimes you can work and still make enough money and be happy. So, that perspective was kind of nice to gain. Going forward, I think our volumes are now getting back to about where we were before, maybe about 5% less. So now with having 8 different hospital systems, you always deal with the possibility of losing a contract or even gaining a contract. And so that's kind of where we always think as far as, when we're considering hiring new individuals, what is the potential for future need? And that future need is always based on newer contracts. Unfortunately, you never know if a new contract is going to need 2 or 3 individuals or just 1. And that is something that we kind of think about. And hence we actually ended up hiring 2 more people for this year, and then 1 new interventionalist, because one of our interventionalists is retiring in June. So I think having a group of 30 and typically more people, you end up getting used to a little bit of turnover with maybe at least 1 or 2 radiologists either leaving or retiring during the year. So I think that, as far as hiring is concerned, we never ended up having to let anybody go, which was nice. But now that the volume is picking back up, we're potentially looking at hiring a few more.
Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you for that. That's a great perspective. 30+ person group. Sounds like you had the history of running a little bit lean, which might have helped you in the pandemic there. And now that the volumes are returning, it sounds like it's sort of status quo or return to normal for hiring for you. But Dr. Fleming, what's been your experience in Atlanta?
Sure. So I'm with Quantum Radiology in Atlanta. It's about 75 to 80 radiologists. And I've been with them for a little over a year. I was in academics prior to that. And so initially when the pandemic hit, it was like, obviously things, especially in the outpatient lines, once the elective surgeries and things like that started to taper and stop, that was a huge change in our volume. So we weren't sure initially what we were going to do about hiring. Luckily, it wasn't at the peak of our interview season. The group met and made a decision that the people that they had extended contracts to start in July, that they were going to honor those. They didn't want to, you know, change or push out their contract dates. And so we knew that we were going to have this kind of surplus of people coming on. And so the group made some decisions about how they were going to do their staffing to allow for us to have some extra people there that we didn't necessarily need with the lower volumes. Once things kind of started coasting, we realized volumes are coming back up and we needed to reassess where we were with hiring. And so we've ended up hiring quite a bit this cycle, and we're back at normal hiring. The main issue has been interviewing. I think that's been kind of a tricky piece for both sides, I think, for both interviewers and interviewees. I mean, it's a different vibe to meet somebody virtually, to not have that one-on-one interaction. I don't think anybody cares about not seeing a CT scanner or anything like that, but it does make a difference to go and see the hospital and the reading rooms and how are people interacting, and you know, what's the workflow like. So I think those sorts of things have been some of the challenges on both ends. And I really think probably not having the interview dinner has been one of the harder pieces, because that's where you really get to meet people in a more relaxed setting and have the group's personality really kind of come through, and also the applicants' personality, and see whether or not they're a good fit. So what they've done is, for some of the local people, they've had one or two of the partners meet them at an outdoor patio to eat and have kind of a lower key lunch in the middle of the interview day. So stop the Microsoft Teams meeting and they all meet at a place near the applicant's house and meet them kind of in a socially distant way to kind of have a different interaction, and then back on the Teams meeting for the afternoon interviews. And I think that's been helpful somewhat for both sides, for both interviewees and interviewers. Our IR people, they didn't want to hire without having them have a visit, and that was a little challenging, just with like state to state restrictions and who can travel and who can't, and whether or not you're going to be able to go back to your home state. So they had to be a little bit flexible with that. But we did have some IR applicants who there was a period of time where the hospital was allowing non-employee visitors for interviews and things like that. So we were able to do that. But I think with anything, I mean, it was just the ability to be flexible and think about what parts of the interview were most important to us, how we were going to get to know a candidate, and trying to be creative in that way. I think nothing still beats an in-person interview, but at the same time, I think a lot of the candidates that we've hired this cycle were just as excited as other ones that we hired in the more traditional interview sense. I think the other part for interviewees or applicants is just whether or not they get to speak to enough people. And I think that's where a lot of the burden is on the interviewee, to maybe, if they can't meet as many people, to try to reach out to the group and talk to them. And so our hiring partner has been spending a lot more time on the phone with applicants, trying to explain a lot more about the details of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. We've found that virtual interviews have been difficult over the year. I mean, we've had a number of people that we've hired in the last year in my group, and I don't think one of them has set foot on the campus. And it's difficult, even, you know, just across state lines and down in Chicago, a couple hours from us. I said, I'd love for you to come up and see. And, you know, we used to have people would go see our recruiter, and they would go with the housing people and have a tour of the area. And all of that's been turned upside down. I certainly agree with you that the lack of the dinner is definitely really difficult to get to know people's personality. I always tell people who are interviewing at our practice or our residency, you know, make sure you're a good fit for the group, or, you know, because it's more likely that you will take on personality of the group than your personality will change the group. So it's hard to get people to know them in these the Zoom settings. especially when you have back-to-back interviews. One thing that we've found helpful is we do schedule some short breaks in there so the candidate isn't lined up with 30 or 60-minute interviews and has no break whatsoever, and people are kind of coming in and out of the Zoom screen. So those are all excellent tips. I think next up we have Dr. DeQuesada. What has been your experience over the last year, and how has the pandemic sort of changed your recruiting and your thinking going forward?
Thanks, Andy. Man, I'm glad you let Dr. Fleming go first, so I don't even have to talk as much because she hit so many good points right on the head. So I am a neuroradiologist in North Texas at Radiology Associates of North Texas. I chair the recruitment committee, and myself and my administrative cohort, Todd Howard, we kind of tag team all of the recruitment effort for the entire group. And this past year, we cracked 200 FTEs, and it's just ridiculous trying to accommodate all of the various complexities of bringing people in the midst of a pandemic. And it's all of the stuff that she talked about. It's the state won't allow them to come visit. It's the hospital won't let them come do a site visit. But they're a proceduralist, and there's somebody who wants to see that we have everything together and we have the infrastructure to handle the kind of work they want to do. So it's really been a challenge to put our best foot forward and present a really competitive recruitment schedule. But all that being said, this is a universal problem. We're all in the same boat. And so we all have opportunities, right, to overcome these challenges. And we've done a lot of the same strategies. Of course, everybody bought the nicest webcams they could. And we all learned how to use Zoom or whatever your, teleconferencing software of choice is. And we've just learned to manage. And it's also a challenge, not just for the individual applicant process, but it's been a challenge for the recruitment process as a whole, because this year, all of the conferences were virtual. ACR, where we traditionally have a big recruitment event of residents and fellows, and that was totally virtual. And then RSNA, we also usually have a pretty good event there, and same thing. And to me, that was kind of devastating for trainees because they rely on that face-to-face networking. A lot of them that are gung-ho and out there to meet groups in the respective geographies that they want to be in, and that's their best way to do it. So we tried to come up with virtual happy hours. The ACR one I thought went off pretty well. We had a great conversational piece. Everyone just kind of chatting. And we tried to host something similar through strategic radiology with a bunch of people in training. So that's what we've had to do. We've had to just be innovative, be creative, take the challenges as they come. Cycle-wise, I think there is an impending shortage of radiologists. I don't know if people are talking about that as much, but we don't have less work. We have more work to do. And with the whole, fear about AI and deep learning, and I think the lack of exposure in medical school, I think there are many programs that didn't have applicants filling their first year spots. And so I think recruitment is going to be an even more and more competitive process going forward. I think that groups will continue to need more and more bodies, and we're all going to have to just be more efficient with what we already have, because it's just going to be a continuing challenge going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree on the lack of in-person conferences and the inability to sort of have the trial interview or the first round. I remember you guys' networking interview or event at ACR, and I interviewed for my group first at RSNA before I went to go there in person. And so, yeah, there's definitely a loss there, and it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Dr. Dr. Rodgers, what happened to your group?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a member of a very small private practice group in West Virginia. We have 6 radiologists. As an earlier speaker said, we had a decline of about 50% at the peak, I would say, during April, and then kind of slowly gained that back over the summer. We're now at about 95% of normal volume. We don't hire every year. I mean, given that we're a small group, hiring and recruitment really is dependent entirely upon a partner leaving the practice or a new contract leading to practice growth. But we were actually in a hiring cycle at the beginning of the pandemic this year. We had a partner late in 2019 announced that he was moving to the West Coast for family reasons. And so we had begun recruiting in December of 2019 and had interviewed a few applicants through February. And then of course the pandemic hit in early March and we just kind of shut everything down. We had a few people come for the interview dinner and come for the tour. But at that point, we kind of, reached out to all of the people that we were still considering, kind of saying like, look, in the middle of this, we're just shutting down our hiring process right now. And so things were kind of on ice through the summer. As we saw the volume come back, honestly, we have 6 people. We staff 4 slots each day. We cover 2 community hospitals, a critical access hospital, and a smattering of imaging centers and physician offices that send us stuff. But we normally staff 4 bodies per day. And during the pandemic, during the slowdown, we cut that down to 3. And of course, we were down 1 radiologist because of the departure early in 2020 of that leaving partner. So we did that kind of for a couple of reasons. The timing actually worked out great for us. Because we had less volume, we had 1 less body to begin with. And so it kind of made up for it. It made up for the volume losses for our paychecks. We were able to kind of spread out vacation, kind of work a little bit better as far as that goes. And then, fortuitously, by the end of the summer when volume had recovered and things were looking normal again, actually our top candidate that we had interviewed back in February kind of just reached out to me out of the blue and said, hey, are you guys looking again? Because he's actually had been out in practice for a few years, but was looking to leave his current group. And I kind of took that back to the other radiologists. We're a really small collegial democratic practice. We just kind of have our meetings in a restaurant, not this year, but every few months we kind of get together and just talk about stuff. But I took it back to the partners and said, hey, this guy that we all really liked, he wants to join the group. He's, things are getting back to normal volume. He's wanting to make a move. And kind of at the same time, we got a new hospital contract, which was going to start actually this month. And so looking ahead to that, seeing that the volumes were getting back to normal, we decided to go ahead and hire. And he's going to be starting next month on February 1st. So things worked out great for us. We didn't really have to try to interview during the pandemic. We had done our interviewing beforehand, and our top applicant actually, decided, around August that he wanted to join. So thankfully we were spared all the Zoom and team interviews. But that's kind of been our experience. And honestly, we're kind of back to normal now. As I said, we're about 95% of normal volume. We just took on that new contract this month, and that's going to boost things, above our normal volume. And, like I said, we only hire when there's a departing partner or when there's a new contract coming on. I look at that as probably being another 18 months due to practice growth. We'll be looking to hire again. And that's kind of our normal cycle every 2-3 years. We need someone.
Yeah, that is a great perspective. And I got to say that I know myself and maybe Ivan are a little jealous that you guys can have a small meeting at a table at a restaurant and decide all the hiring decisions that,
Yeah, it's, being a small group has its pros and cons. I mean, the great thing is, everybody can get together. We just take a vote, we decide what we're going to do. You may not be on the winning side, but, your voice has at least been heard. People can decide, what you want to do. The bad side of a small group is we don't have kind of the administrative staff to help out. And so, you can have to divvy up all this work among the radiologists, and, somebody has to be in charge of recruitment. Somebody has to be in charge of managing finances. Somebody has to be in charge of doing all these kinds of things. So it's a little bit extra work, but it, it comes with its positives as well.
Oh yeah. I would just going to say that, we have such a turnover from people just retiring that it's interesting.
Right.
You have to plan to recruit 5, 10, 15 people a year just to replace natural volume and growth and people getting ready to retire. So I think that was a great introduction from all of our panelists, and I really appreciate them taking the time to talk to us. This is kind of the exciting part where we get to do some Q&A and some anonymous questions. I have a little bit of both coming in. So if you have questions, there are a couple options. You can throw them in the chat. If you are a brave soul and would like to ask your question either on video or audio, you can raise your hand. I think that will bring you to the top of the list, and we can give the Zoom to allow you to speak. And so far, we've got a couple coming in. I'm going to start with the first one, which will pretty much be to all of the participants, and we'll probably go in just the order that you talked. And this is a good one. What do you anticipate the challenges will be with recruitment and paying your own radiologists in the setting of the recently announced D&M cuts? Now, that was projected to be 10, 11% for radiology. I think most of us know that through the large coalition that the ACR built, that was reduced down to about 4% and potential phase-in the future. But that phase-in will probably come into effect over the next 2 to 3 years, unless there's more coalition building and teamwork on the ACR's part. So how will the E&M cuts affect your recruiting plan over this year when there's a planned 5% cut, and over the potential for the next 3 years where that cut may reach 10%? Dr. Alapati?
Yeah. So, as you had mentioned that the cuts now are down to about 4%. And I think that, overall with a group our size, about 30 radiologists, we typically expect about 3% growth per year. So on average, and if we look back to the last 5 years, or at least the 3 years that I've been here, every year incrementally, we've earned about 3 to 5% more each consecutive year. Now, in this upcoming year, what we've tried to do is potentially renegotiate some of our contracts so that we can address some of that reimbursement cuts, and go to some of our insurance providers and say, hey, look, this is what's occurring, and try to get a little bit more of an aggressive rate so that we can be reimbursed accordingly. So what that means for us for this next year is, I think we have a practice manager who typically deals with this, but what happened is that we got into about a percent decrease in revenue projected over the next year. Now, what that means for us is that we try to overall look at, hey, where are places where we can improve our efficiency and improve on, the return. And one thing that we have been discussing is potentially getting a new contract, which is in place, and something that's going to happen within the next 3 months or so. So with that in account, we're really just thinking about continuing the hiring cycle that we've always had. And I think, and other people can attest to this, but the potential for growth is always there with radiology. I mean, you're really running it, you never really run into the issue of not having enough work to do. So I think that one of the things that we really try to do is just look for those new contracts that are out there. And with the landscape in Kansas City, typically most of the groups are a lot inpatient based. There's one group that controls a lot of the outpatient centers. So really it just goes to looking forward to getting new hospital contracts, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Dr. Fleming, E&M cuts and the impact on 2020 and future recruiting.
So we've talked about that, and in the end, it's not going to impact our recruiting, is the short version of it. But we are looking at ways that we're strengthening some of our like outpatient imaging contracts and some of our other contracts to help offset that, and then considering any other ways to to kind of streamline some of our costs. But in the end, we, have slots to fill, so it wasn't going to affect our recruiting.
All right, so for the first two panels, we've heard common theme of lots of volume and not a lot of impact. Dr. DeQuesada, the big group perspective.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll kind of reiterate some of Dr. Fleming's comment, which is that, the work needs to get done. And the fact is, if you're just getting paid less for it, it's still the same amount of work. So no, we haven't planned to change our recruitment in any regards in that. If anything, it has just made us focus more on the technology and efficiency side, how we can be more efficient at doing the work we already do. But no, it doesn't affect our future plans.
Excellent. And Dr. Rodgers?
I would just echo what's already been said. I mean, we're just going to have to work harder and work smarter, to make up the difference. A 4% E&M cut is really not going to impact our hiring plans. A 10% cut, I mean, that's a little bit more significant. So, watching as these things develop, if they do develop in a bad way, that could, but, a 4% cut, we're just going to try to get more business, grow the way we normally grow, and try to make up the lost money with higher volume, and try to do so smartly.
Okay. The next one was, I don't think that any of your groups had this happen, but did you have any perspective on what the question is, did anyone have to cancel contracts that they had offered, or how would that impact recruiting? And I guess I would make the more provocative question of what would have to change? What would be so significant of a change in your recruiting plans, or, a second wave, or now we're into, unpredictable future of the future pandemic? What would have to change that would make you cancel a contract or a situation, something like that? You can go in reverse order, Dr. Rodgers.
Sure. Yeah, I can't imagine a situation where I would cancel someone's contract. I think we would probably try to work with folks and work within the group. As someone else said, you can pay people a shift differential, or people can take vacation. They want to take more vacation. I think we'd probably try to work out a way to make that work. Maybe renegotiate, if there was a fixed starting salary, but try to take the person on, try to accommodate it, whether it be, they're working at a lower volume, or they're just getting more vacation, until we can ride out another wave of the pandemic. But I don't think we'd cancel a contract. We would try to work out some kind of deal where, we're bringing somebody to the group, we're paying them something, they're working some level, and then we're all going to try to ride out this together. That's kind of the way that we would handle it. I can't imagine canceling.
Okay, Dr. DeQuesada, do you think there would be some situation where your group would have to cancel a contract?
Well, I agree with what was already said, that we would endeavor to meet the challenge in some way. We would come up with internally some incentives, or even required, call shifts or something. But that being said, I have to admit, I love that this question was asked, because I've been really trying to recruit for a lot of different positions. And if we had people that wanted to come in and help me do that, then we wouldn't have to even think about something unconscionable like that happening. So no, I think, again, this is the benefit of private practice, I think, is we are much more willing to innovate, suffer, if you will, endure hardship, to make things successful and work well. And so I think pulling a ripcord, if you will, to kind of end a relationship would be seen as the absolute last resort. I don't think that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great perspective. I remind people, when they come in as a associate tract in our group, they are paid, they're guaranteed a salary, and you say, when you become a partner with the full risks and rewards of partnership offers, right? And so every year that usually looks pretty good until you're looking in the spring of 2020, and then you say, well, there could be some real risks to the partnership here, and that might mean that the partners go without pay, or they, have to basically go on furlough and forced vacation. But there's lots of potential downsides to a partnership too. Dr. Fleming, what sort of situation would be your group that would potentially raise the head of the canceling of a contract or reneging, taking it back?
I just have to echo what was already said. I think most of us are in groups that would really kind of bend over backwards to not do that, because the it's word of mouth. It's going to impact you down the road somehow. Radiology is a small community. We all know each other through various ways, or know somebody who knows one another. So I think all our group would do everything that we could, and we always have some of our partners nearing retirement who would say, I'll go half time and do that for a while. So there's a lot of flexibility that we could probably work into to make it happen.
Okay. Dr. Alapati?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll echo whatever has been said before, and we try to pride ourselves on being a very democratic group, meaning that even the people who walk in day one, have a fairly equal say, other than the pay differential. But I think that their value is more than just monetary, and I think that it's something that we respect. And like you had mentioned, we'd potentially end up furloughing or taking more vacation rather than canceling a contract.
I mean, that's kind of what I expected the answer to the panel, but I thought it was a great question to be out there. Now, this is a really nice one. So has the pandemic changed your practice's plans for partnership track? Have you changed the offer, the length, or have you offered more employed positions rather than people who become partnered? And we'll mix it up, and we'll start with Dr. Fleming.
Short answer is no, but I think there was a lot of people who were we have a pretty long partner track just based on our geographic area. So in our metro area, partner track is 4 years at all the big private practices. So I think a lot of people were hoping that there would be some sort of flexibility in it, and it hasn't changed. And in terms of the employed positions, we have our group is largely associate and partner track radiologists. We do have a few employed, but we don't often get a lot of people interested in the employed aspect. I think in part for the way that our partnership is set up, in part just because of income and some of the benefits that come along with partner track. So it hasn't, but we've also reached out and said if there's certain people who want that, employed position that's not as often taken up, but people don't want it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Dr. DeQuesada, what do you think about, has it changed your partnership length or considerations?
Well, I don't think in regards to the pandemic that has changed. I mean, that's something that I think has moved with the market. I think as the market has become more competitive to get recruits, we have had to consider more the desires of the individuals that we interview. And the fact is that it is much more individualistic than I think it used to be, at least from what I've heard. So we do have to consider the entire spectrum of needs. And we do. That's the great thing about a group, at our scale, is that we can be incredibly flexible in what kind of package we tailor for folks. But it's really interesting. You mentioned the pros and cons of owning a practice, and most people don't know the cons of that, and so they just think shareholder is better. But it's not always the case, and we do have people that come in knowing that, and they want to be employed, and that's their demand. that they don't want to have to take the extra call or pay the sweat equity, or or be responsible in down times, that they just want to have a fixed, predictable yearly thing, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said for a guarantee, right? I mean, you can be guaranteed a base, and it may not have the potential for the upside, but it definitely may mitigate the downside. Dr. Rodgers, did it change your partnership for the one person that was coming in, or consideration for the group going forward?
No, not really. I would echo Dr. DeQuesada's comments that our partnership track really depends on the market environment, and the available pool of applicants. The pandemic and E&M cuts and the other stuff really hasn't impacted it. It really depends on how hard we think it is going to be to hire someone. And I'll add to that just by saying we're pretty flexible with the way that we consider that. And when I'm talking to an applicant, I always tell them there's kind of three things that we trade off against each other. There's years to partner, there's your starting salary, and there's your time off in your pre-partnership track. And kind of, if you want more of one, you're going to have less of another. And we can kind of work out a deal based on individual characteristics, what's important to you. And that's really kind of after the interview dinner, after I've talked to you, I kind of get a sense of what is important to this person. And that's kind of how we craft our offer for people.
Yeah, it's amazing that you can be individualistic, and you can actually, I tell people it's always important to focus on the total package, but you sound like you actually can give people the flexibility to craft the package that they want.
Sure, I'll come up with an initial offer that I think is what I think that they want, and then I'll tell them, there's a little give and take on on each of those three variables. You tell me what you think.
All right, Dr. Alapati.
Yeah, so in our group, our partnership track is 2 years, and again, market demand. And I think that in the recent years, we've kind of come across two factors. People coming straight out of fellowship and out of residency. I think that you kind of take what you can get, and if somebody says 4 years, you're like, great. 2 years, great. But there are people who are coming from different groups, and those are the people who we try and tailor things a little differently. And mainly it's based on their experience and that value from their experience. And so in recent past, what we've done is we've changed, the values of, the income for the first year. If, for example, you've had experience, we'll start you at 80% of the partner's income instead of 70%, which we normally do with people who are fresh out of fellowship. So again, it's trying to go with that market demand and see try to give people their the expected value of what they bring to the table when they come to the group. And fortunately, I mean, we've kept a 2-year partnership track for the recent past, and I don't think that's going to change, and I don't think that will change dependent on whether there's a pandemic or not.
And that sounds like 2 years is sort of standard for your area.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. Let's see. We had a question about, without having in-person conferences, it's been difficult to network with potential employers. It sounds like someone looking for a job now. And they said, what would you recommend to reach out to either your group or groups in your region? How would you focus your job search on a particular area? I'm going to go from the bottom of my screen, Dr. DeQuesada.
So I'm actually typing a reply into the all panelist box here. So, it's frustrating. I heard that our email filter has been tightened up ever since that big hospital ransomware thing that happened a couple months ago. I don't know if you heard about that. But that was really big, and actually it affected one of our contracts. So I'll tell you that when it comes to being a trainee, I feel like the people that will tell you best are going to be the ones that you network with on a day-to-day basis that you trust, and so it's going to be the people that you work with, that you're training with, and you should talk to those folks and ask them, hey, where did you train at? Do you know folks in private practice in X city? And is there a group that is great that you'd recommend? And honestly, geography tends to be the rate limiting step for most people. And so if you focus your search on a specific geography, that's probably a really good starting point. If you care much more about the size of the group, the quality of the group, those things, then you probably want to focus on which groups are well represented, at the ACR in the leadership, which groups show up to the state society meeting, which is a great place to network with those groups. And then you can kind of discover them that way. But honestly, it is unfortunate that because conferences have been remote, we've had to be a little bit more innovative. So certainly keep your ears open, talking to your seniors, who can tell you, hey, I heard about this networking event. But usually, strategic radiology has been hosting one. ACR almost always is trying to host one. YPS, and then sometimes there will be some other things going on the side, but that's what I recommend.
Dr. Fleming.
Sure. So I think it is tough, and again, I kind of feel bad saying like I just want to say what everybody else said, but basically I haven't covered it all. But yeah, often it is a geographic issue, and so you start with people that if you're a current trainee, you find current trainees there, hopefully through the ACR, and you ask them what are the good groups in that area, and then I was doing all sorts of crazy Google searches at one time to try to figure out the email addresses of certain people, and you can be creative and find those, or if you know somebody, or talk to your attendings, talk to keep in touch with the people that have recently graduated, because often they're going to be the key to whether or not, you can join their group. And so it's really important to keep in touch. And I'll say it goes both ways. So as I mentioned earlier, I started out in academics, and I ended up joining a group that had a bunch of my co-residents who were younger than me. And so when you are a trainee, it is really important to remember that you don't have to just, we all know the residents that sometimes exist that kind of only are nice up the hierarchy. We need to remember that it's all around. And I would have not gotten this job if I didn't have those relationships with people who were in the younger years when I was a fellow and a resident, and they were training after me. So I think asking around, finding about the good groups that are in the geographic area that you want to be in, or multiple geographic areas, and go from there.
Yeah, radiology is definitely a small community. There's probably some junior residents who are senior to you in your group now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Dr. Rodgers, any tips on communicating or connecting in this era of no conferences and no networking in person?
Yeah. I would say when I was looking for a job, somebody told me that the best jobs are not advertised. Word of mouth and personal connections are kind of the best thing. In this era, it's a little bit harder to do that. So again, connections through residency, we've definitely hired, through that. We all keep in touch with our residency programs and kind of see who's in the pipeline, who may be interested in our area. We've advertised through the ACR Career Center. That's how we hired our latest two people, the last two people we've hired. And the other thing, I heard people say this when I was looking for a job a few years ago, but now that I am a practice leader, I really would not mind to just get a phone call or an email from somebody who says they're, in their second or third year of radiology residency, and they're, 2 or 3 years out from looking for a job, but they're interested in this area. Just touching base, just wanting to ask about the group, wanting to come shadow for a day, whenever that's available. I really wouldn't mind that at all. Recruiting is such a central thing for us. If I can meet someone and develop, a relationship with them over the course of a couple of years, rather than, the standard kind of phone call, interview, dinner, tour, call a few references, figure it out, over the span of a few weeks. I would much prefer that. Even if we're not planning to hire for another couple years, I mean, that works well for somebody who's still in training. And start dates are pretty flexible. We can work more or work less for a period of time to accommodate somebody who we think is a top applicant. And so, even if we don't have a job posted, even if I don't think I'm going to be hiring for another couple of years, building those relationships is key. I would say don't be afraid to reach out. I have med students that come through to rotate. I've had high school students that want to spend a day. I mean, so my gosh, if you're in residency a year or two out from looking for a job, I would more than welcome you to reach out and start building that kind of relationship.
Well, that is great confirmation that cold calls work. I tell people all the time is if you're just in being in a group, just find the practice, try to get a hold of the group resident. I mean, if you're interviewing high schoolers, that's a long pipeline. That's 8 years down.
Yeah, well, no, the high schoolers, like they want to do a project on like, oh, what is a radiologist? For some reason they know that and they want to just come spend an afternoon. So I'm like, oh, whatever, sure.
Dr. Alapati, changes in recruiting strategy now that we don't have, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I actually, going to Dr. Rodgers' point, I got my job by cold calling, and initially I actually sent in my application to United Imaging Consultants, and they sent me an email back saying, hey, we have 100 different applications to look through, and we'll get to yours when we can. And a week or two later, I just called them up and they said, oh, hey, actually, we'd be happy to interview you. And I don't even know if they looked at my application before that, but so it does work. But yeah, I think reaching out to your first ask your mentors in your residency or fellowship program. They usually have a lot of connections, especially if they've been there for a while. I know I was at WashU, and they have like a huge bulletin board where they show where prior trainees have gone, and most of them, if you call them up and say, hey, I worked with this person, and do you remember them? They'll be like, they'd love to talk about it and love to potentially meet you just based on that. So I think one, talking to your mentors, and two, cold calling, I think is perfectly reasonable. And I think most of us would appreciate a phone call saying, hey, we're interested.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. We're coming up in the top of the hour, so if anyone has one last question, we'll burn it in there. But I think that this one is one of my favorites, and in case we end on it, it can be that wouldn't be too bad. This participant wants to know, do you have any predictions about whether the pandemic or the post-pandemic recovery period will have lasting impacts on the small versus large group? And does that favor private practice or some other methodology? And so I'll kind of go from the top of my screen in reverse order, and then that's the alphabetical. So Dr. Rodgers.
Yeah, in terms of long-term impacts, I'm not sure. I will just say we weathered it pretty well as a small group, and we're extremely lean. We have almost no fixed costs. As was mentioned, the partners took a hit in our income back in April and May, and then that started recovering, pretty nicely over the summer. We had money come in through the Paycheck Protection Program and through the Provider Relief Fund. And we ended up making more money last year than we made in the last several years. So you just never know how these things are going to play out. In terms of the long lasting effects of the pandemic, I'm not sure. It really depends on, where do people want to live? I think geography comes back to it quite a bit. I live in a very small city. The metropolitan area is, less than 200,000 people. Some people don't want to live in that kind of environment. If you do, we're a great group. So I think it depends. What I tell people who are finishing residency or fellowship and looking for a job, you need to figure out what it is that you want. What do you really want? And sometimes that's really hard to know what you truly want. Do you want a good group? Do you want to make a lot of money? Do you want to live in a big city? And there's a trade-off amongst all those things. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how the pandemic is going to affect people's opinions and valuations of those different things, but that's sort of how I look at it personally.
Yeah, I mean, the saying is always, my crystal ball is just as cloudy as yours, so who knows? And I encourage our trainees when they're talking about it, and my colleagues say, make decisions that your future self will not be unhappy with. And sometimes it's hard to know what future you is going to want in 5-10 years down the road. So, Dr. Fleming, do you think that post-pandemic changes will favor small, large groups, no impact?
I mean, I really feel like it's not necessarily a small versus large. I think some size of the group is really dependent on geography and how many hospitals are in that area. So, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's not going to be a viable group. I do think it's about the flexibility and the ability of the group to change as those needs happen. And so I think it's really important for all of us, whether or not we're straight out of training or been out of training for, a number of years, just to remember that what's going on now and how we're handling this now may not be how we handle the next big hit in whatever way that might be. And that we just need to be, trying to think about different ways of handling it, not just looking at what we did the year before and trying to repeat it, but try to kind of be innovative and try to find ways to handle it. I think, some of the differences is going to be just how much, when the pandemic hit and the partner salary took a hit, I think it was having a discussion amongst your group about how you were going to handle that decreased volume. And so that's just really an important part of your group dynamic, is to be able to talk about those things and come up with a way that's appropriate for everybody involved. So I have no answer either.
Excellent. I mean, ask the group that you're interviewed with or interested in how they handle the current time of crisis, and that might be a good indicator of their future reactions, right?
Exactly.
Dr. DeQuesada.
Well, I would say that the interesting paradox of the way that small and large groups dealt with this is that many of the small groups had easier access to the PPP loans because they often had personal relationships with their local banks. And they were able to be at the head of the line, basically, getting personal attention. Whereas, if you're a mega group that had been doing your banking with a mega bank, you're not at the head of that line. So that was a kind of paradoxical thing I had heard of anecdotally in GSER commission stuff we've been talking about. The private equity versus physician-owned thing, I don't think I could draw a broad stroke except to say that if you look at the broader market perspective, certainly cost cutting will hit a private equity group, I think, a lot harder than it would a physician-owned group because of that loss of ownership mentality. I think a shareholder group of all owners will be much more apt to decrease a lot of their luxuries and even, suffer. Whereas a private equity group, their loans are due. They don't have the benefit of the kind of things that they can do. And if they lose people, it may be a lot harder to recruit those people back. Anyway, that, if I had to conjecture purely, that would be my guess.
Excellent. Yeah. Sounds like a cloudy crystal ball down there on the other side of the screen too. Dr. Alapati.
Yeah, so, I think that as far as the large versus small group perspective goes, I think a lot of it has to do with the personality of really the community and the hospital systems that, we are servicing. So I think that basically our group, is medium sized, and I think in the Kansas City area, we have a lot of medium sized group. We don't have very many small groups, and we don't have a very large group. So I think it's, like Dr. Rodgers had mentioned, that, based on geography, you'll see kind of the shape of different groups molded based off of, what the hospital systems are requiring of you. you know, it's also, you know, something that we need to learn to adapt based on what factors come in. Say, you know, for example, a private equity group comes into the area and you need a little bit more of a larger group to withstand some of the, you know, competition. You know, strategic radiology being an example, I think. I think those are things that, you know, you try to adapt to and try to factor into your practice, the way that it's structured. But overall, I think that, you know, again, it's going to be irrespective of, you know, the pandemic and, you know, outside factors. It's just going to be mainly geographic, local, what's going on with the community that really factors into what different groups do.
Excellent. Yeah. So we're coming up right on the 1 hour mark here. And I think there's one last question that we might be able to sneak in, sort of a short answer between everybody. And, you know, has this changed the timing of the job search for your group? You know, I would say the sort of short answer is, when should people be contacting your group if they're looking for a job? And we'll go in reverse order there. Dr. Alapati, when should they contact you if they want a job?
Immediately. I think, you know, better sooner than later.
Dr. DeQuesada?
Yeah, same answer. I mean, we begin to engage people during their training, and the better we get to know you, the better chance you'll have when we finally are ready to, you know, have a serious discussion. I would say reasonable, you know, when you begin your final year of training is probably the best time to approach a group. So sometime in summer, you know, beginning your last year of training.
Residency, not fellowship.
Well, fellowship, you know, some fellowships, you know, might be 2 years, or, you know, if it's a 1-year fellowship, then certainly summer beginning your fellowship.
Excellent. Dr. Fleming.
Yeah, I think somewhere in that late 4th year, right at the beginning of fellowship year is the time. But it's really never too early to contact and just send an email out and say, you know, this is the time frame that I'm going to be looking. What do you guys, you know, what do you anticipate your hiring needs are going to be, and starting that conversation for an introduction.
And Dr. Rodgers?
Yeah, I would echo Dr. Fleming. You know, it's never too early. Send an email, make a phone call, introduce yourself. You know, like I said, we're not always hiring every year given the small size of our group, but if we know you're going to be looking at a certain time, we can, you know, maybe make some plans in advance if you're the right person.
Yeah, and that's sort of the advice I give, is especially if you're flexible and, you know, you could reach out to a group and say, I'm interested in these 2 or 3 different specialties. What do you think you might need in 2, 3, 5 years from now? Groups can generally tell what they may or may not need. I think that we will wrap it up there. We will obviously make the recording available to share and to follow up. We will have the panelists, you know, they're able to respond to emails. If you are interested or have any questions that didn't get answered, if you'd like to learn more, email the YPS@acr.org. And just remember, this was a part of the sort of YPS ongoing educational series for 2020, 2021. And with the annual meeting now announced to be virtual, we're planning some virtual programming that will take place in the time frame of ACR this year. And we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar as well. But we hope you all can register and learn more about what the section can do to sort of help you as you make that transition from trainee to early in career. And then as you're starting to balance work life with all the demands of early practice and what the ACR can do to support you. So I want to extend a special thanks to all of our panelists who spent the hour with us and answered some questions and gave us their perspective. And if you guys have any questions at all, just email us at yps@acr.org, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everyone.